In February 1942, Japanese prisoners of war in Australia were given white rice for their first meal, and many of them refused to eat and began praying softly because they believed execution was coming. The guards were puzzled because they thought rice would comfort the men and remind them of home. They did not realize that in Japan, white rice was traditionally served to condemned criminals as a final meal before death. What those prisoners experienced during the next 3 years would shatter everything they believed about the war, their enemies, and even themselves. The question was whether they would long enough to share that truth. At that time, the Pacific was in flames. Japanese warships moved across the ocean with unstoppable force. Singapore had fallen, even though the British claimed it never could. Newspapers in Tokyo celebrated victory after victory. Imperial forces captured the Philippines, Hong Kong, and Burma. The rising sun flag replaced other flags across Asia. Crowds in Japan cheered in the streets. Children waved flags, and radio announcers proudly declared the strength of Japan and the weakness of Western nations. They claimed white soldiers were soft, and that America and Australia were collapsing. They promised the war would end quickly, and Japan would dominate the Pacific forever. But another reality existed. Japanese soldiers were being captured. At first only a few, then dozens, then thousands. When Singapore fell, some could not escape on remote islands. Others were left behind. From childhood they had been taught never to surrender death before dishonor. Capture meant betraying the emperor family and ancestors. Better to die fighting or by your own hand than live as a prisoner. Many tried to kill themselves when surrounded. Some succeeded, others failed. Those who survived were taken by Australian and American forces on transport ships bound for Australia. They sat in overheated cargo holds, refusing food, waiting for torture and death. Had been told Western soldiers mutilated and experimented on prisoners. Some prayed to Buddha, others to their ancestors, others stared silently at the walls. When they arrived in Australia, they were moved in covered trucks. Through small gaps they saw wide open land, dirt roads, endless fields, eucalyptus trees with peeling bark. No rice paddies, no forested mountains, only flat earth, tall grass, and a vast sky. They were taken to newly built camps in remote areas of New South Wales, Victoria, and Han. Inland regions. Tall wire fences surrounded wooden guard towers. Sleeping quarters were long, simple buildings of wood and metal. The air smelled of fresh timber and red dust. The guards were not the monsters the prisoners expected. Many were older. Men, farmers, shopkeepers, clerks, too old or unfit for jungle combat. Some younger ones had failed fitness tests. They carried rifles awkwardly. They spoke casually, laughed, even ate sandwiches. The prisoners waited for brutality, but none came. Communication was difficult with almost no interpreters. They were shown clean sleeping rooms with metal beds, thin mattresses, rough blankets, screened windows. Simple but orderly. One corporal named Hideo Nakamura from a farming village near Osaka touched the cold metal frame of his bed. It was sturdier than anything he had used in training or in the jungle. Most prisoners were between 19 and 35, from rural villages, factories, fishing towns. They believed what propaganda had taught them. Films, pamphlets, and lectures described Westerners as weak, cruel, godless. Bushido demanded no surrender. To be captured meant ceasing to be Japanese. Now they felt like nothing. When the first meal was served, they entered the dining hall, cautiously. Metal trays were placed before them. In the center lay steaming, polished white rice, the kind rarely eaten except on special occasions in Japan. They stared in horror. An interpreter explained their fear to the guards. The rice symbolized a final meal before execution. Guard Tom Richardson, gray-haired and sunburned, said they offered rice out of kindness. The interpreter translated. Prisoners remained tense, expecting violence. Minutes passed, nothing happened. One starving man finally tasted the rice. Was simply rice, soft, slightly sweet. Others slowly followed. 2 weeks passed, and no one died. Each meal continued to bring 200 to 250 grams of pure white rice, more than many had eaten before the war. Fresh milk appeared at breakfast. In glass bottles, soft white bread with butter and strawberry jam was served. Each prisoner received generous portions. Meat, beef or mutton, about 400 grams weekly. For many, meat had been rare in Japan. Nothing made sense. Nakamura was assigned to kitchen duty. Inside were industrial gas stoves, refrigeration units, mechanical mixers, organized shelves, and clean concrete floors. Fellow prisoner Kenji Yamamoto, who once worked in a munitions factory, whispered that this kitchen had better equipment. And factories back home, supply trucks delivered fresh vegetables, flour, sugar, meat. One shipment contained more produce than Nakamura's village saw in a month. Ice arrived in summer, huge blocks wrapped in canvas, used casually to cool drinks. Then, a red truck with the Coca-Cola logo appeared. Guards drank the fizzy sweet beverage and offered bottles to prisoners. Tom handed one to Nakamura. The cold sweetness astonished him. Glass bottles were discarded casually, though glass was precious in Japan. Guards shared smooth Virginia cigarettes. Tom taught simple English words: table, chair, water, sky. He smiled encouragingly when Nakamura repeated them correctly. One day, Tom kicked an oval Australian football toward the prisoners. Nakamura hesitated, then kicked it back. Soon guards and prisoners played together awkwardly yet peacefully. Red Cross parcels arrived containing chocolate, canned fruit, condensed milk, cookies. Chocolate melted sweetly on Nakamura's tongue. Christmas 1942 brought decorations. Extra meat, plum pudding, singing and cheer. The guards celebrated while at war. They seemed generous because abundance allowed it. Nakamura secretly kept a diary, writing at night in tiny script. He recorded confusion, kindness and doubt. He questioned everything. Propaganda had taught him electric lights, running water, flushing toilets, vehicles passing daily, all indicated resources beyond Japan's capacity. Yamamoto calculated that Australia spent more keeping prisoners comfortable than Japan spent supplying its own soldiers. Newspapers reported America producing 50,000 aircraft in a single year. Propaganda claiming Western weakness began to crumble. In August 1943, prisoners were allowed to build a garden. Seeds, tools, fertilizer were provided. Trust unsettled them. A shovel could be a weapon. Nakamura briefly imagined attacking Tom, but realized he did not want to. Tom had shown him family photos, taught him words, shared cigarettes. They planted tomatoes, lettuce, carrots, beans. Water flowed freely from hoses. Guards even added manure from their farms. Trust deepened change within Nakamura. Christmas 1943 brought turkey, nearly 800 grams per prisoner, mashed potatoes, stuffing, gravy, vegetables, plum pudding, cake, and beer including Victoria Bitter. Guards toasted peace. Frank, a young guard, shared photos of his wife, Mary, and children, Jack and Emma. He said he did not hate the prisoners. He hoped the war would end, so all could go home. Nakamura felt shame for the hatred he once carried. That night he wrote repeatedly, "I am ashamed." By 1944, the garden flourished. Vegetables were traded for cigarettes or chocolate. New prisoners arrived describing starvation, disease, and desperation in Pacific jungles captured. Enemies in Australia lived better than free Japanese soldiers. English classes and paid farm work opportunities were offered. Yamamoto worked on a mechanized farm with tractors, irrigation trucks. The farmer even offered future employment after the war. Such normal generosity toward a former enemy was unimaginable. Japan surrendered in August 1945. Months later, in late 1946, prisoners were repatriated. Nakamura felt fear, not joy. He packed his blanket, dictionary, photographs, coins, unopened Red Cross parcel, and his hidden diary. He shook Tom Richardson's hand, saying, "Good luck, take care." The return voyage was crowded, dirty, with minimal food. When Nakamura reached Yokohama, he saw ruins. Tokyo half destroyed by firebombing. His family lived in a small shack made from scrap metal. His mother was thin and frail. Meals were meager, rice mixed with barley, tiny portions of fish. He could not describe the abundance of Australia. His younger brother had died in Okinawa during brutal fighting. The contrast crushed him. He worked rebuilding Japan while hunger persisted at night. He dreamed of gardens, turkey, Coca-Cola, and felt guilty. In 1952, he wrote that truth felt like poison. Japan slowly rebuilt with American aid. He married, had a son, Hiroshi, and kept his diary hidden. In 1968, he returned to Australia with Hiroshi. The camp was gone, but the Kaura Japanese War Cemetery remained carefully maintained. Volunteers tended graves of Japanese prisoners. He reunited with elderly Tom Richardson. They visited the cemetery together. Tom remembered holding the hand of a dying Japanese prisoner because no one should die alone. Kindness had been real. In 1988, Nakamura was interviewed for a documentary about Japanese prisoners in Australia. He said the rice he thought meant death instead nourished truth. He learned enemies were human. Propaganda collapses in the presence of kindness. The strongest weapon is dignity toward one's enemy. A bowl of rice, a garden shared, photographs changed him more than bullets. He said captivity taught him freedom from hatred. Nakamura died in 1994 at 79. His diary was given to the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, where researchers read his careful record of transformation. In his final entry, he wrote gratitude for the camp, the guards, and the rice that seemed like death, but became the beginning of truth. War creates enemies, but kindness creates human beings, and that is what endures.